Welcome back to this edition of Tobago Thursdays on the Now Morning Show. Continuing the conversation, joining us is Dr. Vanus James, an economist, talking about pre-budget predictions and forecasts for Tobago. Good morning, Dr. James, and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you with us this morning. Thank you so much for rising to the occasion and just chatting with us a bit. Tell us, first of all, what would you say are some of the critical predictions or things rather that need to be considered in the upcoming budget?
For the country or for Tobago?
For Tobago, Dr. James.
For Tobago, well, the main urgency that we face here now is going to have to be the central focus. If the government knows of them, the economy in Tobago collapsed last year, and nothing much has been done since then to initiate revival and growth. The collapse was substantial in major sectors of the economy. So the thing that is going to be needed in the context of appropriate budgeting would be to recognize the scale of that collapse and then undertake initiatives to address the collapse. Now, you have to remember that the way the law works, the proposals to address the collapse should have been made in the budget proposal by Farley. But that was not done because the collapse itself was not recognized. So my expectation is that the Minister of Finance would stick with the tradition of giving somewhere in the neighborhood of the 4.03% of the national budget recommended by the Dispute Resolution Commission. And my forecast on the national budget is that in the light of the trends in recent trends in oil prices, that would still get you somewhere in the neighborhood very close to the last budget, the last year's budget, and that would mean Tobago would be somewhere in the region of 2.4 billion, as has been happening in the last couple of years.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. James. Okay, so immediately, what would you say are some of the critical things that will be necessary to address the collapse moving forward?
Well, the main thing is for both the country and Tobago to recognize what is required for development. The collapse itself is a consequence of the nature of the economy we're running in Tobago. That's an economy that is heavily dependent on import, and that lacks what I would think of as an appropriate economic structure. We don't produce enough exportable capital like exportable education, financial services, professional services, healthcare services, and stuff like that. And you would recognize the validity of that observation if you look at what Cayman Islands and Bermuda are doing. They are the two successful ones in the region, and their economy focuses primarily on professional services linked to financial services. Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago has to be heading in a similar direction, partly because of the fact that the whole world is moving away from the fossil fuels anyhow. So in another 20 years, we'd be underwater if we keep depending on oil and gas. What that means is the fundamental initiatives for both Trinidad and Tobago would be initiatives to grow our capacity to produce exportable education, exportable healthcare, exportable creative services, and stuff like that. And it would be that kind of refocus of our economy that will allow us to get back onto a high development pathway.
Interesting. All right. So as you mentioned, those exportable factors, do you think that's something that is feasible within, let's say, you said 20 years for Trinidad and Tobago, or it's something that we can possibly look at developing within, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, you have to start start now. When you're talking about development, you have to start now. And there are some key things that will have to be done in the context of Tobago as against the country. In the context of Tobago, we have to come up with a way to finance development beyond what the national budget can afford. And what that means is development financing capabilities. So I have always recommended the introduction of a development bank in Tobago, which would make PG financing more flexible, meaning that in addition to the 2.4 billion that you get, the private sector's needs could be met by establishing a viable development bank linked in many ways to our credit unions and so on. That would allow the private sector, including any incoming private investment from Trinidad and from the rest of the world, to find sufficient local financing to take on the competition with the rest of the world in the areas that I described. Your medical doctors would need financing to establish high-quality facilities in Tobago, for example, and you can't simply rely on foreign investors to do that. So you need some foreign investment flows to do that. So you would need some local financing capacity. That would be issue number one. You can also begin right now to reform education, because you're not going to be able to develop either the national economy or the Tobago economy on the basis of the kind of education system that we run now. We need to transform the system to emphasize problem-solving skills from preschool all the way to tertiary education. And then on top of that, you need to attract foreign entrepreneurs to come and establish startups and bring some of the ongoing operations to a place like Tobago, anchored on our tourism platform, so to say. And that could start now. You don't need to wait for 10 and 15 years. That could start now and begin to bring fruit pretty early. Now, once you get that underway, reforms in your approach to something like the carnival industries. Right now, as you know, in Trinidad and Tobago, we do carnival as a big fete.
Yes.
But ultimately, you've got to move away from the set approach and begin to think in terms of what we've understood for a long time, the choreography that Minshall has been talking about. You have to master that. And then you have to get into the business of video game production and film production and 3D film production, virtual reality activities, and so on, all AI-driven today, that would be possible. And we have to move in that kind of direction with our creative industries generally, so that they become even more powerful exporters than they are. I mean, I can tell you from my research that in 2016, for the first time in the country's history, we achieved the status of a net exporter of music and entertainment and so on. We're going to have to build on that, and that requires a substantial, significant initial thrust. You have to bring in high-quality programmers and all those kinds of things, just to transform the nature of the content we generate that could be sold on the global stage. And then, as you might imagine, we have to do something with our tourism brand, or housing stock especially. But the lesson here is to be moving in the direction of long-stay tourism. So if you look in the Cayman Islands, for example, you would see that 80% of the stock is not in the form of Hyatt and $500 a night rooms and so on. It's in the form of $120 a night room that a lawyer could hire for 3 and 4 months in order to come and deliver high quality services. That's how they are able to sustain a significant long stay tourism. They bring Price Waterhouse and Pete Mawick and all those kinds of agencies to come to the country to do sustainable accounting, and all of that is only possible if you put people in high quality 10-bedroom housing, home quality, home style A-class facilities. So if you look there, you see that's the way they're stuck in. That's where Tobago has to go rather than down the road of Marriott and all those kinds of things. They are important too for the
Yes,
season
they
and
are.
time.
Dr. James,
Yeah,
thank you
yeah.
so much. We look forward to the budgets on Monday, and we look forward to having you back on the show again soon. And I hope you have a great day. Apologies for the cutting.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
All right, that's Dr. Vanus James, an economist, talking to us about the pre-budget predictions and forecasts for Tobago. Stay tuned. We are coming to the end of today's Now Morning Show.